Welcome to Exposing It All. So, it's our first podcast, babe.
Yep, I'm excited.
All right. So, this is a podcast about life, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. I have a couple of topics that I want to talk about right off the bat. And one of the first topics, we've kind of talked about this before in our real life. We've had this conversation before, when it comes to, family, it's kind of a devastating topic. People don't really want to talk about it, but we're going to talk about it today. So let me just start off by saying, what made me want to talk about this is I heard a devastating story and I was kind of told to keep it under wraps. And I shared a little bit about it with my brother, and as you know, babe, that my brother works in the prisons.
Yeah.
And one thing he told me was, you don't ever want to talk about something that's going to cause harm to somebody else. But the four principles, what were they? You talk about the harm and bring, what was it?
Reflection.
Reflection. You
reconcile.
Yeah, you talk about the harm, bring it to take accountability.
Accountability, yep.
Get to a point of forgiveness and reconciliation, not, within yourselves. If you can reconcile with others, of course you do that.
Yeah. Sorry, I got them right here. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. What are those?
So, number one was recognize you're wrong. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Two is restitution. Mm-hmm. Three was repent. And four was ask for forgiveness.
Yeah. So he teaches in the prisons for people who are, some people are in there for life, right? Some people are in there for short term. Some are terrible, heinous crimes. Some of them, might be your minute crimes. And, he teaches people to take accountability, and he teaches restorative justice. And it is what he likes to say 100% kingdom principle.
Yep.
And I think that that's great. And it's taught me a lot, because when I initially wanted to talk about this subject, he sent me some of his teachings and also some classes that I could take. So that way, when I talked about this subject, I really wanted to talk about this because it's been heavy on my heart and I didn't know how to talk about this originally. Like, I remember I wanted to talk about it on Instagram. I didn't know what kind of platform I wanted to use, but I knew that I wanted to talk about this because it's bothered me a large part of my life, right? Because I never really understood why we didn't talk about this. So I'm just going to jump in a little bit and, we're just going to have a conversation back and forth. And this is new for us. Like we've never done a podcast. So if I'm like looking at David or looking at the camera, this is new for us. Okay.
Yeah, most definitely.
So I do have some notes here. So if I'm looking down, it's just because I took some notes to be able to kind of keep myself on track, because I do have like a squirrel brain and I'll get off topic. And I kind of took some notes because I wanted to talk about, why I wanted this to be my first topic. Like I said, I shared with my brother, and he asked me some questions. I told him about this devastating story. And one of the things was, he asked me some questions I didn't have the answer to. He was like, okay, well, if this is under wraps, did this person go to jail? Did they, is it under investigation? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I just heard this and it like broke my heart, like I heard about a predator. I heard a story about a predator, and then it took me back. And like I said, this is not a subject that everybody wants to talk about. And David knows, unfortunately, my mom's brother is a predator. And I will never forget being a young child, being in the car. My mom took us in the car, me and my younger sister and my dad. We went in the car, in the truck. We didn't know where we were going, but my parents took us with them everywhere. And I remember sitting outside of my mom's brother's house, and I don't necessarily call him uncle. And the reason I don't call him uncle, as you know, is because he is a predator. And I remember sitting outside the house, and I wasn't sure why. We were very young at the time, like why we were sitting outside of his house, but my mom was sitting there and she was waiting, and she was just watching his house, and she's like, he's supposed to be at work. At the time he was a I believe a sheriff. And she was watching his house, and she's like, I told you, like having this conversation with my dad, like, I told you, like, there's somebody at his house. And it looked like a young person in and out of his house. He didn't have young kids, he lived alone. And I just remember going there a couple of nights in a row. My mom was watching. And a few weeks later, my uncle was arrested. And this news article had come out in the paper, and it was about my uncle who had a 15-year-old boy in his home. And I remember a lot of the family keeping this under wraps and not really talking about it, you know, and my parents never kept secrets from us. And I talked to David about this, and the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because for years, like David and I have been married for 16 years. And yeah. um I shared this other devastating story with my brother, I asked him, I'm like, why doesn't anybody talk about this? And why doesn't anybody in the family ever talk about this? And like, why was this a secret? And then I started to ask David, I'm like, why don't people talk about this? Like, shouldn't we, even as a family, like know that we have a predator in the family? Like, yeah, it's embarrassing, of course. Like, nobody wants to say like, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin is a predator, or
Yeah, you're embarrassed. There's shame there. There's things that people, like Sarah said, that are, since they're in the dark, they want to stay in the dark. And the realization is that, like Sarah said, we don't hide anything from our kids either. Neither did she get things hidden from her. But you have to have people be aware of that. Like, I don't want my children to think that it's okay to be around people that are that way. I had mentioned to Sarah, being grown up in the family and being around all the time, always accepted, always loved on, and grateful for that. But why it was okay for this person to be around not only my children, but around everybody else's children. Like, there's lines that you don't cross, and I didn't feel comfortable with it. So that's when I asked Sarah, why is it okay for this person to be at events? Like, yes, other people that we love were there, and I'm all for that. I love those people, have respect for them. Even this man, like, did I treat him any differently? I didn't give him extra attention, but I would shake his hand, say hello, and go on with my life. I wouldn't get into detail of my life or his life or anything like that, or anything like that. But trust me, I did keep an eye on my children and make sure, they would say hello to him, but there would be no embraces or anything like that. Most definitely not. So the biggest thing is that just knowing that people have their own shame, and family members have their own shame that they don't want to share, and it doesn't make it easy. But when it causes harm to other people, or could potentially cause harm to other people, there has to be a fine line there, and you have to be real with yourself. Because trust me, if anything were to ever happen to either one of our children, it would be devastating. It would be probably the worst thing that could ever happen, and I wouldn't ever wish that to happen or want that to happen to anybody. And that's why we're talking about this, to expose the fact of plain in sight, hidden in plain sight. Nowadays, it's what's good is what's bad is good, and what's good is bad, and that's not okay.
and I think as the years have gone on, you know, for me personally, we grew up kind of in a toxic family. We grew up in a toxic family. My family wasn't tight knit, and I didn't really understand it. And I think I desired to be around my family so much that I was around my family, even knowing that there was this predator here. I remember my mother telling me before. So my mom's brother, he was caught and was sentenced to 26 years in prison. He obviously didn't serve the full time, and he was protected in prison because he was a sheriff, and he was I believe a Marine. He was part of the military before, but I think that if he was not an officer of the law, he would not have been protected in prison, because a lot of predators in prison, they are not protected. Had they known what he did, he probably wouldn't have been protected in prison, especially a child predator. Okay. When he was in prison, my mom later found out that he didn't just harm others. Like, my own siblings were victims. Okay. But my mother told me before she passed, they didn't keep secrets. Like I said, they didn't keep those kind of things under wraps with us, and they didn't keep secrets from us. And I remember my mother telling me, he would send like birthday cards and all this stuff to us, and my mom would shred them. She wouldn't even let us look at them while he was in prison. And I remember her telling us before she passed away, because she passed away and he got out of prison she passed away. And I remember her telling us that to be cautious, because he never said, I'm sorry. He never said he would reoffend, but his words were, I will never go to prison again. I would kill myself before I go to prison again. And over the years, I remember going to family events because I just wanted this tight-knit family. Like, David comes from a tight-knit family, and I always desired that. And I wanted to be around my family. And even though I was cautious with my children, like, we watch them like hawks. Like, we don't let our kids go anywhere. They're always with us. We homeschool. We have our kids, like, they don't really sleep over anywhere. They're with us 24/7. But we would compromise a little bit and go to family events. And over the years, I'm like, I would still question that. Like, why doesn't anybody else know? Like, family and friends are invited to these events and they don't even know that their children are around a predator. But yet, if it was in the news that there's a predator in your neighborhood, they would repost that on Facebook and be like, there's a predator in the neighborhood. But you would invite a family member or invite a friend that's never even met your family to your gathering, and there's a predator in your midst, and not even say anything. And I didn't understand that. And I think as my children have gotten older, and like, trafficking in America, it's the second I want to say the second most profitable illegal industry in the world.
That's sickening, because the saying is, you can sell a child multiple times. You can sell cocaine only once or twice. And that phrase there is just sickening. It's disgusting to think about. We have children, like I said, boys and girls, and for either one of them to ever be exposed to something like that is just disgusting and heartbreaking. And it's just, there's a sick, sick world out there that we live in, and it's not okay. Yes, movies have come out, things like that, but there's not enough awareness about these type of things, because, like Sarah said, it's the number 2 profitable thing in the world. And what do people love? Money and their own selfish desires, which is pretty sickening.
And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this too is that I think that we need to be more transparent. We need to be more honest. We need to have, I didn't ever understand why my mom wasn't like, family is everything, blood is thicker than water. She was never really that way. She wanted us to be that way, but she also didn't raise us that way. And I think it's because she didn't know that. She had some horror stories herself, like growing up. Like, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail about like her past, but because of their past, that's probably why they went down this path of destruction, or why her brother did. Not making excuses, but I wanted to talk about this, and that's why I called this podcast Exposing It All, because I think when trauma is not talked about, or these type of things that people go through in their lives, or sicknesses are not exposed in families, or these type of things are not talked about, it can continue throughout the generations. It can continue to happen. And when these things are not talked about, it can happen again. Somebody else can reoffend. When we don't talk about these things, it can happen again and again and again. And I know over the years, I have grown and I have healed, and I have realized I want to break all the generational chains. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, because I did compromise. I compromised because I wanted that tight knit family and the unity, but I compromised at allowing my children to be around predators, and then later finding out that's not the only predator, and the family is just willing to allow predators to come to family gatherings, to sit at family dinner tables, to sit at weddings, and to be around children when they've never said, I'm not going to reoffend, or they haven't offended more than once. And I think that it needs to be known, it needs to be talked about that this person has offended, and it should be known and it should be talked about, especially in a family, especially when people have children, and especially when a children has been offended. You know, the Bible talks about if anyone should cause one of these children to sin, a noose should be, a noose or a block should be tied around their neck, and they should be drowned at the bottom of the ocean. You know, and I just believe that we should be talking about these type of things so that way it doesn't continue to happen. And I know from hearing the horror stories, like from my mother, for example, like it has happened. It happened to their generation. It happened to my mother and her siblings. And what happened? Her sibling, I don't know if her siblings offended. I do know one of her siblings is definitely guilty and has offended. And I do know that there are generations after that that have offended. And I think it needs to be talked about so it can be exposed and it can be addressed. And those things can be corrected, they can be fixed, and people can find healing, because sometimes I think they hide behind that trauma. Instead of like talking about it, they suppress it. They suppress it. And then what do they turn to? Alcohol, or they turn to drugs or depression and suicide. I know from not healing from my own trauma, not even sexual abuse related, but my own trauma, I turned to alcohol. I turned to suicidal depression because it suppressed the symptoms instead of getting to the root cause. And I just think that it needs to be talked about, and these predators do need to be exposed, because if you would talk about a predator that's not in your family or that may live in your neighborhood, why would you not talk about the ones that are in your family that are or in your bloodline and try to get them help? Or it's the same for like addicts. Like, would you not, if your child was walking out into the street and a car is coming, would you not tell them they're about to get hit by a car or pull them out of harm's
Of
way?
course you would. You would want, you wouldn't want that to happen. You'd see it in front of you being happening. And even like I told Sarah, I was like, just what she said. Would we go to any other function where there's sexual predators in a neighborhood watch or anything like that? If it's just posted in the neighborhood app,
No.
would we go to that event where that person is? No, we wouldn't. You wouldn't do that. But like I said, for other people, we had sacrificed to go there to see the other family members. But like I said, I always questioned it. I respected, and loved my wife. And I mentioned it to her, and she's like, you know what? I never thought about it like that, babe, because I was going for a different purpose. Like she said, she was going for the purpose of to see her family member. It didn't matter who was there. But like I said, our head's always on the swivel. We're always watching and everything like that. Thank God nothing ever happened to our children, but we're just very protective of our children, if you will.
And we're the same as my parents were with me. Like that, it's the same with like death. Like we don't hide death from them. We don't hide the reasons for death from them. We don't hide sexual predators from them. We don't hide that kind of information from them, because they do need to be aware, and they do know that if it wouldn't matter. And we've even told our children, and I know that this might sound extreme, but I'm like, if it was me, you go tell somebody else.
Yep.
You tell somebody you trust.
Exactly.
If it was your mother, your father, your brother, it does not matter who it was. You go tell somebody you trust, because it does not matter who it is. You need to make sure that don't ever be afraid. Don't ever be afraid. And I always tell my children, we both do. We're like, we'll always believe you. And you have to understand, like, we will always believe you, because I just don't think that anybody has it in their right mind to make those kind of things up in their head. I don't.
Or even when people aren't believed, and that's what happens too, is that a real situation happens to where people do speak out and they say something happened, and it's so unbelievable that people don't believe them, and that is hurtful too. So those are things that definitely we try and not try, but we do instill in our children, that we will always go to bat for you. We'll always believe you. And like, yeah, hold ourselves accountable as well. Like, we're not calling ourselves predators or anything at all. We're saying that, yeah, our kids know you need to speak up. And yeah, they definitely do. And I'm grateful for that. Not that back talking, but
For real.
definitely speaking up and having their own voice.
Yeah.
Like Sarah said, growing up, we kind of didn't get to have our own voice, and that's just kind of
Yeah.
the culture and the way that it was. Do as I say, not as I do, or even talk when spoken to, or things of
Yep.
that sort too. So it's like for your children to have their own voice is very important. They're their own unique people, and they're gonna express themselves. And how else can we have them express themselves without allowing them to do so or giving them permission to,
Right.
or asking them questions and them saying, well, I really don't know. Like they do, and they can express themselves, and we love that about our kids.
Yeah.
So definitely
And
have more stuff. Sorry.
no, that's what this is all about. Like I said, it's important for us to, like I said, the whole point of this is just to, like I said, expose the fact that it, to some people, they think that if they do expose that this exists in their family, it brings shame to them. It doesn't bring shame to them. We're all human. A lot of us don't want to share the skeletons in our closet, but the truth is sometimes when we share the skeletons in our closet, somebody else can relate. Somebody else can find healing in that. Somebody else can say, you know what, me too. Somebody else can talk about their experience, or somebody else can, maybe it's time to share it, to expose it, so that way you can find the healing and we can start to actually, you know, grow from it instead of just suppressing it and allowing it to be hidden deep down. Or how do we know it's not still happening? And there shouldn't be like just this protection. Like I personally am so tired of like, family is everything. We're not going to talk about it. It's in the past. Like, yeah, the past is in the past, but at the same time, it is so bad and so wrong to have happened in the first place that it needs to be talked about, especially when there wasn't the reconciliation
Or
part.
even remorse
Yes,
from the
there was no
beginning
remorse from the beginning.
at all. And even in the second situation, we're going to touch on that. You know, Sarah talking about family members, like you may have this image of somebody, and then when you find that out, like that image is tattered, image is shattered.
Yeah.
It's no longer the same that you think of that person, and it's hard. It is, like we said, it's not easy to talk about because it is shameful. It is heartbreaking, but is it more heartbreaking for that to continue to happen? Yes. Would it be devastating for it to happen to somebody close to you, or someone like your own child, or even your,
And I think it's more
men
heartbreaking
can
to
be
hide it
victims as
than
well.
to it's more heartbreaking to hide it than for everybody to know about it.
Oh,
Because
most
I feel
definitely.
like I would much rather know that my kid could be in potential danger around somebody and than to not know at all. Or what if my kid is in harm's way and they are harmed and they're like, oh, I should have told you about that.
Yeah.
I should have warned you about that. Like then I'm gonna be even more upset at the person who hit it and they knew. Like I feel like it needs to be talked about, and that it's so near and dear to my heart, and for those who don't know as well, because this has been so silent because people are so caught up in the political agenda. The month of January is actually Trafficking Awareness Month. And it's not just sex trafficking. People are in forced labor. They're forced workers. We were in California in January, and there are literally districts where there is forced manual labor workers
Yeah.
in the United States. Like I said, it's the second most profitable illegal industry in the United States. In America,
Yep.
there are people who are forced into labor. They are forced into sexual trafficking. They are forced into all these things. And January is a month that they spread awareness. There's people who meet to get people out of these places, and yes, they are trafficked to other countries and everything. And, we watched a pastor who actually went to Thailand. 4-year-olds, 4-year-olds are top tier in other countries. And you know who traffics children the most? School teachers. school teachers.
It's always people that are trusted, like, and we have to, like Sarah said, tell somebody who's trusted. Well, you got to be aware of who you can trust,
Yeah.
as well. So, and that's so sad too, because as parents, like Sarah said, we do homeschool, but a lot of parents do trust those teachers, those after school programs to be entrusted with their child because, hey, I need to work, I'm working overtime, whatever it may be. But
and not
those
everybody
might be
can
the people that,
homeschool, and I
no, they
understand
can't.
that,
And I
but
understand that, and there are good programs out there. There are good people, but there are those few that you still have to make your child aware, question everything, question everybody, definitely speak up, speak out. I can say that I've told Sarah too. I think that, not even in a bad way, but like Sarah, would speak up for herself. So a lot of times it's the quiet people or the unspoken ones that get attacked because they know they're not going to say anything, or there's that closer bond to where, hey, you're not going to say anything because you care about that person or there's a shame. But I'm grateful that Sarah, that never happened to Sarah with all the stuff that did happen in her family. But and other families, but like I believe that they knew that she would speak out and she would say something and they would be revealed. And who knows, like, not that I'm grateful that that never happened is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, that's what I mean about having your voice and being aware of those things. Like you said, like, to have a child treated as a item to be sold over multiple times, like, that's just disgusting. That's just sickening. The movie Sound of Freedom. Oh my gosh, like, you guys need to check it out if you haven't seen it. Very, very good movie. It opens up your eyes to the reality of how poverty-stricken people are the most targeted. Yeah. Because they can be told through their child, they can have a better life, and they have that full trust because they know the potential and love their child, but they don't know the what these predators plan on doing with their children. Right. And they end up doing it, and it hurts and it breaks, and it is never, you're never the same. At 8 years old, 4 years old, to be sexualized as top product and to be hurt and to be forced to do things that you don't even know about, that is disgusting, disgusting. And
just teach your children to be like we do. We teach your children to be bold, teach your children to speak up, and it's not wrong. Like, you can be respectful and speak up, but you can be kind and still speak your truth.
Yeah.
You don't have to be harmful, you don't have to be mean, you can still speak your truth. And to be bold, especially when you're being harmed, to be bold and to not fear. Yeah. That is something that we have instilled in our children, and they are bold. They are. We have some bold children, like David said, like, not that back talk sometimes, but they have a voice. And there, a lot of people tell us we've never met children like yours, and I think it's because we do have a good balance. We teach them, like, to be bold, but to be kind, to be fearless, but also to be selfless. Like, we teach them some very deep principles, but to also, like, and we teach them about awareness. Like, we're not quiet about things that they need to know. And yeah, they might be young, like the youngest is 7 years old, but we teach them the things that they need to know and to be aware of in this world, especially because we don't live in the day and age where you could just go outside and run the streets until the street lights come on, like when we were younger. No. Like, you can't do, not that my mom let me do that anyway, but
Yeah,
but like, yeah, well, I wasn't even allowed out of her sight, really. But given the circumstances of what she went through, but I mean, like, most kids our age could have done that. So like I said, just teach your kids, especially this day and age, to, like, be aware. It's not bad to teach them about that. It's not bad to teach them what can happen to them, and just but that's all for today. We definitely just want to, like I said, it's exposing it all, talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful.
Yes.
Just about life. Today was a tough topic, but we'll have more fun stuff too. Yeah. So thank you for joining us, and have a good one.